New Year's Eve, 1999. The Y2K bug had us all freaked out. Computers were going to explode. Missile silos will begin just randomly launching missiles at cities, all because the Y2K bug was not fixed. It was a moment of potential computer catastrophe, and we had a set date, a set time when that monstrosity was going to be unleashed upon the world, and we waited for it. We anticipated it, and the excitement grew and grew and grew, and nothing really happened. It was a heck of a time. But that was not the first such moment in computing. In fact, if you were around in the early 1990s, you may remember the Michelangelo Virus. Oh, the Michelangelo Virus was a heck of an event. There was one moment, one specific moment, March 6th, and we were all waiting for the catastrophe, the calamity of computer bedlam that would be unleashed on March 6th. Because of the Michelangelo virus. It was on the news, the evening news, the cable news, in the newspapers. It was everywhere. And we were all waiting for what was going to go wrong. But the story of the Michelangelo virus, really, to be properly told, you got to go back a couple of years. You got to go back past the 1990s into 1987, specifically to New Zealand. This is where the story really kicks off. Because in New Zealand, a college student created a virus, a fairly simple virus called Stoned. And the virus only did two things. One, it replicated itself very quickly and easily among floppies and hard drives, whatever drives it came in contact with. And two, when you booted up your computer, it had a 1 in 8 chance of saying the words, "Your PC is now stoned, legalize marijuana." That's all it did. It didn't overwrite any data. It didn't destroy your drives. It didn't launch any nuclear missiles. It just told you to legalize marijuana. Now, this particular virus lived in the end of the master boot record on your drive. So on your hard drive, let's say, it lived in the last couple of bytes, the last couple hundred bytes of that master boot record. And this is notable as it's one of the earliest, not the earliest, but one of the earliest mass spread master boot record BIOS reliant viruses that came out, because it didn't really use your operating system. It used the BIOS in the IBM compatible computers to spread itself. As soon as those bytes got read, it got executed as part of the reading process of reading that drive and spread to whatever other drives were connected and the BIOS knew about. And in fact, here's a screenshot of a hex dump of the virus itself. If you look down there at the bottom right-hand corner, you can see your PC is now stoned. It's pretty amazing. So this virus went all over the place. It actually got pretty widespread, but a lot of people just lived with it because it didn't really do a whole lot of anything else. In fact, it had a ton of clones. The equivalent of what we would now call script kiddies all across the world got a copy of this virus, used a simple hex editor to edit the text of the virus to say different things, such as the Swedish disaster and bloody June 4th, 1989. This was modified to commemorate massive world events like Tiananmen Square, to just say silly sayings and whatnot, but it was spread everywhere. It was very easy, and it was a very common virus, and it all stemmed from this first Stoned virus. Well, flash forward a couple of years to January of 1991 and Australia, where this virus, this Stoned virus, was everywhere. I mean, it was lousy. New Zealand and Australia had the Stoned virus all over the place. And someone, not known who, we still don't know for sure who did this, someone modified the Stoned virus. And they modified it in two very important ways. The first was that the Stoned virus only kicked off 1 in every 8 times you booted your machine. So what the Stone virus did is when you started up, it read the code off of the master boot record and it divided your boot time by 8. And if it cleanly divided, which meant it had a 1 in 8 chance of running, it would display the "your PC is now stoned" message, right? Legalize marijuana. And it would display that message. Well, this version of Stoned didn't do that anymore. It didn't run every time your PC booted with a 1 in 8 chance. Instead, it checked the date. And if it was March 6th, it kicked into gear. It actually did something. If it was not March 6th, it did nothing. It stayed quiet. It didn't put any messages on the screen. It did absolutely nothing. Only on March 6th. Every March 6th, by the way. Now, what did it do? It was nasty. It overwrote the first 100 sectors of your boot drive. So if you had your hard drive in there and you had the first 100 sectors on it on March 6th, wiped out. It was basically overwritten with null, effectively rendering your boot drive unable to boot. Now, all the rest of the data on your drive was still intact, but most people weren't going to see that. It looked to them like their drive was just toast. And most people, in order to fix that, which was an easy fix, were simply going to essentially format and repartition and format your drive. And your drive would work again just fine. However, if you did that, you would have lost all of your data. So you would have to use some additional tools and have to have a little bit of working knowledge of how your drives work in data recovery in order to recover all your data. If you could do that, your data was probably safe, but most people wouldn't know that. So it was discovered there in 1991, and we now had a date. We knew that on March 6th, something was going to happen. Now, I want to read something to you from Joe Wells. And who is Joe Wells? Joe Wells was an absolute legend in the field of antivirus software, right? He worked in the antivirus world for years in the late 80s and early 90s. He was a big deal. I'm going to read this quote to you from Joe Wells. In January of 1991, Roger Reardon of Cybec in Australia discovered a stoned variant. That's the one we're talking about. He found it triggered on the birthday of Max Telfer. Max, evidently not wanting the thing to be named after him, suggested the name of someone else born on that day. So Roger named it Michelangelo. Aha! Michelangelo's birthday is March 6th, so this became known as the Michelangelo virus. Now, it almost became the Max Telfer virus, but Max Telfer didn't like that idea. But of course, when you have a birthday shared with a famous person, you remember some of those famous people. So Max is like, no, name it Michelangelo. So that's why it's named Michelangelo. The person who wrote the virus, we have no idea why he chose March 6th. Maybe he chose it because it was Max Telfer's birthday. We have absolutely no idea. March 6th, as far as we know, was an arbitrary date. We have no clue. Joe continues. In March, at an antivirus conference, Roger gave me a copy of the virus. I really didn't think much about it at the time. I had no inkling at all of the magnitude of media mayhem that Michelangelo would cause. 2 things here. Number 1, way to go, Joe Wells, on your alliteration. The magnitude of media mayhem that Michelangelo would cause is now one of my favorite sentences. And second, oh my gosh, was he right about the media mayhem. It went nuts. Now, at this point, 1991, March 6th had come and gone. Some PCs had been affected, but very few. This virus was in the wild, but it wasn't widespread. It was a small contained virus issue. But then it had some time. And over the course of 1992, that virus spread worldwide. Now, you've got to remember, this is 1992. This isn't the time when people went on a website and all of a sudden your Windows XP machine has a ton of viruses. These viruses were spread mostly by disks being passed around, floppies being handed here and there, and it spread by that worldwide because this was a sort of virus that you stick that floppy in, reads up, and now your hard drive's infected too, right? Didn't require you to do much of anything, and you'd never even know it. So friends casually passing data back and forth, maybe pirating little software, passing it back and forth, and this thing spreads all over the place. It spread like chickenpox. It was crazy. Joe continues. So Michelangelo hit the headlines in early 1992. And Michelangelo actually was in the wild, and there were more antivirus companies competing for user dollars. Predictions of destruction ranged from one company spokesman who allegedly claimed that as many as 5 million systems would go down to another company spokesman who said that it was more likely that you'd spill coffee in your keyboard than get the virus. And now the headlines were off the charts. Again, this was all over the evening news, and the 5 o'clock news was like a new computer virus. I wish we had video clips of all those moments, because it was intense. Anyone who was around in early 1992 and was kind of a computer nerd, you remember it was just an onslaught. It was almost every night leading up to March 6th. People were freaking out. Here's a couple of headlines that were put in various magazines and newspapers. Michelangelo virus is alive and virulent. Virulent? That's a hard word for me to say today. Waiting for March 6th. Doomsday nears for infected PCs. And my favorite, paint it scary. Businesses, others scramble to thwart Michelangelo PC virus. People were freaking out. And there was one person that was on the TV as the expert almost more than anyone else. They had experts from every single antivirus, security, and computer company on planet Earth talking about the Michelangelo virus. In fact, you heard from people at Apple who actually went on the news in a few places. Macintoshes are not impacted by this, so our recommendation is to buy Macintoshes. That literally was a thing. That happened. But there was one guy that was on the news across the nation, basically shouting from the rooftop that the sky was falling, that millions and millions of PCs on March 6th were just going to not be able to boot anymore, and we're just going to be trashed. And it was John McAfee. Oh yeah, the legendary John McAfee. He was out there just speaking about it. Now at this time, of course, he was running McAfee, right? McAfee antivirus was a big friggin' deal. And this resulted in huge numbers of sales of McAfee antivirus, in addition to every other antivirus package on the planet. In fact, the antivirus industry went through the friggin' roof. Like, this was a moment. This was a specific moment. In fact, the specific moment that defined the future of antivirus, because this huge amount of sales that happened of every single antivirus package out there was just astronomical. I mean, if you put together a bar chart, I don't have their financials in front of me, like it would be before Michelangelo's down here, during Michelangelo, their profit soared up here. It went crazy, and these companies just grew massively from that point. So then what happened? March 6th occurred. March 6th of 1992 landed, and the Michelangelo virus kicked off. Well, I'm going to read to you an Associated Press report here. I'm just going to read to you the whole thing. New York, Associated Press. Computer virus hits, but termed a dud. The day of techno doom turned out to be a dud. The much-hyped Michelangelo computer virus struck at scattered points around the world Friday, but failed to live up to predictions of worldwide catastrophe. A virus expert compiled reports of about 2,000 damaged machines worldwide by late in the day. A spot check by Associated Press bureaus found few companies or other personal computer users were affected. The dire projections had ranged into the millions of infected PCs. Some experts said the anticlimax could make computer users less careful about the thousands of other variations of the insidious electronic invaders, which remain a real threat. Again, insidious electronic invaders. The way people talked about computers in the 80s and 90s was awesome. Things like information superhighway and insidious electronic invaders. I mean, come on. People don't talk like that anymore, and they should. They go on to say, a quote,
If there's an upside to all this, it's greater awareness of the problem, said Pam Kane, an author on viruses and owner of a company that makes antivirus software. The downside is it's the boy who cried wolf. Of course, that boy is more than not John McAfee. The virus sits dormant inside IBM-type personal computers awaiting the PC's internal clock to reach March 6th, the birthday of the Italian Renaissance artist. Once the PC is turned on that day, the virus can destroy programs and data on the computer's hard disk. The virus, a rogue bit of computer software, was discovered about a year ago in Europe. Well, sort of. It was discovered in Australia, and then people talked about it and exchanged it during a conference in Europe, but I'll let the Associated Press have that one. It moves from computer to computer as users exchange infected floppy disks. Its creator and the connection with the artist are unknown. For days, news media relayed forecasts of the impending doom from Michelangelo. The story had all the right elements. A mysterious invader with a sexy name that could cause havoc by a definite deadline and the machines relied upon by millions. The reports often failed to mention that many projections of potential damage were provided by companies that make antiviral software and stood to benefit from the scare. One source was John McAfee of McAfee Associates, the largest seller of virus-killing programs. McAfee was widely quoted as saying Michelangelo had infected up to 5 million computers worldwide. Asked Friday whether he had overstated the case, he said the low rate of actual Michelangelo damage was due partly to precautions so many PC users took. McAfee said he received at least 1,000 reports nationwide of hits by the virus Friday, which he believes are a fraction of all the incidents. Joseph Wells, Joe Wells again, a virus specialist at McAfee competitor Certus International Incorporated, said he compiled a list of about 2,000 PCs worldwide damaged by Michelangelo based on reports from other virus experts and organizations. For each of these hits, almost 200 other computers were found to have been contaminated with the virus before Friday deadline and cleaned, he said. The scare prompted many PC users to invest in antiviral software at $100 or more per copy. Computer stores reported they were cleaned out of the programs. I mean, this was a huge event. Michelangelo was our first Y2K bug. I mean, there were other computer scares that went nowhere before this, but the absolute scale of this was off the charts. And here we are in 2024, and we've now come to the point where we don't even notice news about malware and Trojans and viruses so much anymore because it comes several times per year. But back then, this was unique and fascinating and newsworthy. Again, cable news, network news, every night, especially leading right up to March 6th. It was a big friggin' deal. So, to Joe Wells, to John McAfee, may he rest in peace, and to everyone else involved with this, thank you for giving us a whole lot of entertainment. Thank you for all the antivirus work you do over the years. And hopefully we don't have too many more, here's a deadline, everyone's all gonna die, computer viruses and bugs in our future. But there's the legend and the story of the Michelangelo virus. If you are watching this on, let's say, YouTube or Rumble or anywhere else, you really should be a subscriber over at the Lunduke Journal. You should head over to lunduke.locals.com where you can watch this show, all the other shows I do, the articles I produce, even the comics I make, all without any advertisements of any kind. You should get on over there and support the work of the Lunduke Journal, because there's nothing like it, baby. And here's the thing. The Lunduke Journal has 3 independent areas, and each of those areas has a different focus, and 2 of those areas are politics-free, at least for the most part. I mean, every now and then, you hear a little bit of politics because, like, a tech company will say something political and we have to mention it. But we don't get into political arguments. We don't talk politics. None of that stuff happens over at lunduke.locals.com because we believe firmly that computers should bring us joy. No matter what your political affiliation is, we should all be able to hang out together and marvel in our common history as computer nerds. So head over to lunduke.locals.com for that. There's also nerdyentertainment.locals.com where we have a nerdy book club. We have a nerdy movie club. We just watched Stargate and talked about that together. We're going to be doing Logan's Run next. We're doing the Barsoom Chronicles from Edgar Rice Burroughs, and we're going through all sorts of stuff and having a good time. And then if you want to talk politics, we do have a political side where we talk politics with a nerdy edge over at conservativenerds.locals.com. You can get a subscription to all of those. Head over to lunduke.com for all of the information on that. It's really pretty straightforward. There's no ads there. There's no big tech support of any kind. We don't take any money in ads, no money in sponsors, no money from big tech, no money from little tech even. We just are purely independent journalism and purely independent nerdy computer fun. All right, everybody. With that, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, across the inner tubes, I do declare, end broadcast.